Hey guys, today we begin with a calm tour of Earth's biggest giants. We'll meet whales longer than jets, land animals that shake the ground, and ancient monsters that ruled the skies and seas. Get ready for gentle wonder from start to finish. But before you get comfortable, please make sure to like the video and subscribe if you genuinely appreciate the work I do here. And please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, put your phone or television remote out of reach, and let's move into tonight's journey together. Picture yourself floating in the deep blue void of the Southern Ocean, where the water stretches endlessly in every direction, cold and pristine. Here, in these vast liquid territories, lives the largest creature our planet has ever known, larger than any dinosaur, larger than any creature in the fossil record. The blue whale glides through these waters like a living cathedral, a testament to the ocean's capacity for the extraordinary. These magnificent beings can reach lengths of up to 100 feet. Imagine 3 school buses lined up end to end and weigh as much as 180 tons. That's the equivalent of about 30 elephants, all contained within a single graceful form that moves through the water with surprising elegance for something so impossibly massive. Their sleek bodies are built for the long journey, streamlined and powerful, painted in shades of blue-gray that seem to capture the very essence of the deep ocean itself. The heart of a blue whale alone weighs as much as a small car, around 400 pounds of pure muscle that pumps blood through arteries so large that a small child could crawl through them. This colossal heart beats just 5 to 6 times per minute when the whale dives deep, slowing its rhythm to conserve oxygen for the long descent into the ocean's mysterious depths. The whale's tongue, meanwhile, weighs as much as an elephant, a massive muscular organ that plays a crucial role in the feeding process that sustains this gentle giant. But perhaps most remarkable is how these titans sustain themselves. Despite their enormous size, blue whales feed almost exclusively on some of the ocean's smallest creaturestini, shrimp-like animals called krill. During feeding season, a blue whale can consume up to 4 tons of krill in a single day, using a feeding method that seems almost impossibly elegant in its simplicity. The whale approaches vast swarms of krill with its mouth agape, taking in enormous gulps of water, sometimes as much as the volume of a large swimming pool in a single mouthful. Then comes the magic of baleen feeding. Instead of teeth, blue whales have hundreds of baleen plates hanging from their upper jaw like a living curtain. These plates, made of the same material as human fingernails, act as a massive filter. The whale uses its enormous tongue to push the water out through these baleen plates, trapping millions of tiny krill inside its mouth, like nature's most efficient sieve. This feeding strategy depends entirely on the ocean's seasonal rhythms. During certain times of the year, particularly in polar waters, krill populations bloom in astronomical numbers, turning patches of ocean into living, pulsing clouds of tiny orange bodies. The whales follow these blooms across thousands of miles, timing their migrations with the precision of ancient mariners reading the stars. But blue whales navigate by sound as much as by sight or instinct. They produce calls so deep, so low in frequency, that they're largely beyond human hearing, sounds that rumble through the ocean like distant thunder. These calls can travel for hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles underwater, allowing whales to communicate across entire ocean basins. Imagine a conversation that spans continents, voices calling through the liquid darkness, connecting these solitary giants across the vast blue wilderness. For much of human history, we barely knew these creatures existed. Then came the era of industrial whaling, when steam-powered ships and explosive harpoons made it possible to hunt even the largest whales. Blue whale populations, which may have once numbered in the hundreds of thousands, were reduced to just a few thousand individuals by the mid-20th century. These gentle giants, who had ruled the oceans for millions of years, were nearly erased in just a few decades of intensive hunting. Today, blue whales are protected worldwide, their populations slowly recovering under international conservation agreements. They remind us that even the largest, most powerful creatures on Earth are vulnerable to human impact, but also that protection efforts can make a difference. In the deep blue waters they call home, these ocean colossi continue their ancient migrations, their low songs echoing through the depths, carrying messages we're only beginning to understand. While the blue whale commands attention through sheer overwhelming mass, its slightly smaller cousin takes a different approach entirely. The fin whale, second largest creature ever to grace our planet, achieves magnificence not through bulk but through an almost impossible elegance. Picture, if you will, a living torpedo stretched to nearly 80 feet in length, its body sculpted by millions of years of evolutionary refinement into something that seems to slice through water as effortlessly as a knife through silk. Where the blue whale resembles a floating cathedral, massive and imposing, the fin whale embodies the spirit of a racing yacht. Its body tapers with mathematical precision from a relatively narrow head to an impossibly streamlined tail. The dorsal fin, positioned far back along the spine like a ship's sail catching favorable winds, rises in a graceful curve that somehow manages to be both substantial and delicate. This is not the plodding giant of the deep, but rather the ocean's own silver arrow, capable of sustained speeds that would make a submarine envious. But perhaps the most curious feature of this magnificent beast lies in its face, where nature seems to have played an elaborate joke on symmetry itself. The fin whale's lower jaw displays a striking asymmetry that appears almost like a mistake until you understand its purpose. The right side gleams brilliant white, while the left remains the darker grey-blue of the whale's back. This isn't some quirk of individual variation, but a species-wide characteristic that has puzzled and delighted marine biologists for generations. The asymmetrical colouring extends beyond mere aesthetics into the realm of sophisticated hunting strategy. When a fin whale approaches a school of krill, or small fish, it doesn't simply charge forward with mouth agape like its blue whale relative. Instead, it employs a technique that borders on the theatrical. The whale approaches its prey from below and to the side, rolling onto its right flank so that the brilliant white portion of its jaw faces upward toward the school of fish above. Imagine the scene from the perspective of a small fish swimming in a dense school near the surface. The water below appears dark and safe, the perfect place to shelter from seabirds diving from above. Then, gradually, a pale glow begins to emanate from the depths below, growing larger and brighter with each passing second. By the time the fish realize that this ghostly light is actually the underside of a whale's jaw, it's far too late to escape. The fin whale's mouth opens like a cavern, throat pleats expanding to accommodate thousands of gallons of water and everything living within it. This hunting technique, known as lateral lunge feeding, represents just one example of the fin whale's sophisticated approach to survival. These creatures can process enormous volumes of water through their baleen filters while maintaining the speed and agility that their streamlined bodies promise. They are simultaneously bulk processors and precision instruments, capable of feeding efficiently while remaining among the fastest large whales in the ocean. Yet for all their evolutionary sophistication, fin whales faced the same grim reality as their larger cousins during the 20th century's industrial whaling boom. Their speed, which had protected them from earlier generations of whalers rowing wooden boats, proved insufficient defense against steam-powered ships and explosive harpoons. Whaling fleets pursued these silver speedsters across the world's oceans, reducing populations from hundreds of thousands to mere thousands in some regions. The North Atlantic population suffered particularly devastating losses. Ships departed from stations in Norway, Iceland, and Newfoundland, returning with holds full of fin whale oil and baleen. The efficiency of modern whaling meant that even the ocean's fastest giants couldn't outrun human technology and economic demand. But unlike some cetacean species that continue to struggle toward recovery, fin whales have begun to reclaim their ancestral waters with quiet determination. In recent decades, researchers have documented increasing numbers of fin whales returning to feeding grounds in the North Atlantic that had been silent for generations. These sightings represent more than mere statistics. They're evidence of the ocean's remarkable capacity for healing when given the chance. The fin whale's recovery reminds us that conservation success often happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, like watching the hands of a clock move toward a better hour. Picture yourself suspended in crystalline blue, where sunlight fractures into dancing columns that pierce the ocean's surface like cathedral light. Here, in the warm embrace of tropical seas, you're about to encounter something extraordinary, the largest fish that has ever lived. Not a whale at all, despite its name. but a shark so immense and gentle that swimming beside one feels like drifting alongside a living island. The whale shark appears first as a shadow, a darkness that seems to materialize from the blue void itself. 30 feet long, sometimes 40, occasionally pushing toward the mythical 50-foot mark that makes marine biologists' hearts race. Its massive head approaches like the bow of some ancient ship, mouth agape in what appears to be a permanent, 4-foot-wide smile. But this gentle giant isn't hunting you, it's barely aware of your presence as it glides through clouds of microscopic life, performing one of nature's most elegant dining experiences. Watch as the whale shark begins its feeding ballet, a spiraling dance through plankton-rich waters that turns the ocean into a living snow globe. Its enormous mouth, wide enough to swallow a small car, works like the universe's most sophisticated vacuum cleaner. Water rushes in at tremendous volumes, over 400 gallons per minute, carrying with it billions of tiny organisms that form the base of oceanic food webs. Copepods, krill, fish eggs, and larvae disappear into gill rakers that act like the finest mesh filters, trapping anything larger than 2 millimeters, while allowing pure water to flow back out through 5 massive gill slits. But perhaps most remarkable are the dermal denticles that cover this giant's skin-tiny, tooth-like scales that feel like sandpaper to the touch. These aren't just protective armor, they're hydrodynamic marvels that reduce drag and allow something the size of a school bus to move through water with surprising grace. Each denticle is perfectly oriented to channel water flow, creating microscopic vortices that help propel this massive creature forward with minimal energy expenditure. Every whale shark carries its own constellation, a unique pattern of spots and stripes that serves as a biological fingerprint. No two patterns are identical, and marine biologists have learned to read these stellar maps like ancient navigators once read the night sky. Behind the gills, the spots are largest and most distinct, creating identification patterns that researchers can photograph and catalog. These living barcodes allow scientists to track individuals across oceans and decades, revealing migration patterns that span entire ocean basins and life cycles that may stretch beyond a human lifetime. The whale shark's story intersects with our own in ways both wonderful and concerning. In places like the Maldives, Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, and Western Australia, these gentle giants have become the cornerstone of sustainable tourism industries. Swimmers and divers travel thousands of miles for the privilege of floating beside these spotted leviathans, generating millions of dollars in conservation-focused revenue for local communities. Scientists attach satellite tags that reveal epic migrations journeys of thousands of miles that connect feeding grounds across entire oceans. These tags tell stories of deep diving behavior, with whale sharks descending to depths of nearly 6,000 feet into the perpetual darkness where the pressure would crush human bones. What draws them to these abyssal depths remains one of the ocean's great mysteries. Yet challenges persist. Ship strikes threaten these slow-moving giants, while plastic pollution fills their feeding grounds with indigestible debris. Climate change alters the distribution of their microscopic prey, forcing longer journeys and uncertain feeding opportunities. In some regions, these magnificent creatures still fall victim to fishing operations, their fins prized for soup, their meat sold in distant markets. As you drift beside this spotted constellation made flesh, remember that you're witnessing something both ancient and fragile, a creature that has survived mass extinctions and ice ages, now facing perhaps its greatest challenge in the form of humanity's expanding footprint on the ocean. The whale shark's gentle presence reminds us that the largest wonders of our planet often depend on the smallest acts of conservation, and that sometimes the most profound encounters happen not when we hunt or capture, but simply when we learn to swim quietly alongside giants and marvel at their existence. Picture yourself floating weightlessly above an underwater mountain range, where ancient coral seamounts rise from the ocean's depths like cathedral spires reaching toward distant sunlight. Here, in these blue-green sanctuaries scattered across tropical seas, you might witness one of nature's most graceful giants, gliding through liquid space with the serene majesty of a living kite. The giant manta ray moves through these waters with a wingspan that can stretch 7 meters from tip to tip. Imagine a creature wider than a London bus, yet moving with such ethereal grace that it seems to dance rather than swim. These gentle leviathans belong to an ancient lineage, their cartilaginous skeletons echoing the same blueprint that has guided their smaller ray cousins for millions of years, yet scaled up to proportions that challenge our understanding of what's possible beneath the waves. What makes these giants truly remarkable isn't just their size, but the intricate biological machinery that allows them to thrive in the ocean's vast emptiness. Those distinctive cephalic finch-the-horn-like projections that unfurl from either side of their cavernous mouths aren't mere decorations but sophisticated feeding apparatus that have evolved into living funnels. When a manta ray encounters a rich patch of zooplankton, these fins unfurl like organic scoops, channeling the tiny creatures toward their gaping maw in a feeding strategy that's both elegant and devastatingly effective. The manta's mouth, stretching nearly 2 meters wide, contains no teeth at all. Instead, rows of tiny gill rakers act as biological sieves, filtering the ocean's smallest residents from tons of seawater. It's a process so gentle that the ray barely disturbs the water around it, yet so efficient that a single individual can consume over 20 kilograms of zooplankton in a single day. But perhaps the most mesmerizing aspect of manta ray behavior is their famous barrel roll spectacular underwater acrobatics that seem to defy the laws of physics. When these giants encounter a particularly dense concentration of plankton, they begin a series of graceful somersaults, their massive wings creating spiraling currents that concentrate their microscopic prey into tighter, more manageable clouds. It's a feeding technique that transforms the ocean into a three-dimensional dining room, where physics becomes the servant of appetite. These aerial displays often occur at cleaning stations' underwater oases, where smaller fish gather to perform essential maintenance on visiting giants. Here, manta rays queue with surprising patience, hovering motionlessly while schools of cleaner fish work systematically across their skin, removing parasites and dead tissue. The etiquette at these stations is remarkably civilized. Rays wait their turn, position themselves carefully to give the cleaners access to every surface, and even seem to request specific attention to particular areas by adjusting their posture. The relationship between mantas and their cleaning crews represents one of the ocean's most sophisticated service industries. Cleaner fish receive a steady meal, while the rays enjoy what can only be described as a full-service spa treatment. Some individuals return to the same cleaning stations repeatedly, suggesting not just biological necessity but perhaps something approaching preference or even comfort. Yet these magnificent creatures face an increasingly uncertain future. Giant manta rays often fall victim to fishing operations, targeting other species, their enormous wingspans making them particularly vulnerable to nets and long lines meant for tuna or sharks. When caught as bycatch, their slow reproductive rate means populations struggle to recover from even modest losses. Recognition of their vulnerability led to their inclusion in CITES appendices, providing international protection for these gentle giants. But enforcement remains challenging across the vast expanses of international waters where mantas spend much of their lives, making conservation efforts as complex as the creatures themselves are magnificent. As our understanding of these oceanic angels deepens, we're discovering that their role in marine ecosystems extends far beyond their impressive dimensions. They're living links in an intricate web of relationships that spans from the tiniest plankton to the largest predators, gliding through their blue world with ancient wisdom written in every graceful wingbeat. In the crushing darkness of Antarctic waters, where sunlight has never touched the seafloor and the temperature hovers just above freezing, something extraordinary moves through the midnight depths. Here, beneath 2 kilometers of black water, lives the largest invertebrate our planet has ever produced. The colossal squid drifts through this alien realm like a living nightmare made flesh, its body stretching longer than a city bus and weighing as much as a small car. Imagine descending into this world of perpetual night, where the pressure would crush a human body in milliseconds, and encountering a creature that defies every assumption about what invertebrates can achieve. This is Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, the colossal squid, and it represents one of nature's most spectacular experiments in building something immense without a backbone. Unlike its famous cousin, the giant squid, which achieves length through impossibly long tentacles, the colossal squid takes a different approach to enormity. Its mantle, the muscular body cavity that houses its vital organs, can reach 2 meters in length and bulge with the mass of a thoroughbred horse. When fully grown, these creatures tip the scales at 500 kilograms, making them not just longer than giant squid, but significantly more massive, more substantial, more real, in a way that makes your imagination struggle to contain them. The true marvel begins when you examine their arms. Each of the colossal squid's 10 appendages bristles with hooks that rotate on swivels like some medieval torture device engineered by evolution itself. These aren't the simple suction cups you might expect, but sharp, curved talons that can pivot and grip with mechanical precision. The largest of these hooks, found on the club-shaped ends of their 2 longest tentacles, measure over 2 centimeters in length and curve, like eagle talons, designed to puncture and hold onto prey that might outweigh the squid itself. Picture these hooks in action, rotating to find the perfect angle of attack, then locking into flesh with the determination of a steel trap. The squid's arms work in concert, a ballet of controlled violence that can subdue creatures weighing hundreds of pounds in the absolute darkness of the deep ocean. Each hook leaves distinctive wounds, crescent-shaped scars that scientists have found on sperm whales, telling stories of battles fought in depths no human will ever witness. But perhaps the most peculiar aspect of colossal squid biology is how they achieve neutral buoyancy in their high-pressure world. Rather than maintaining gas-filled swim bladders like fish, these creatures fill their bodies with ammonia, creating a solution that's less dense than seawater. This means that colossal squid essentially float through the depths saturated with a chemical that would be toxic to most life forms. Their entire existence, a careful balance of controlled poisoning that allows them to hover motionless in the crushing depths, waiting for prey to drift within range of those swiveling hooks. The few encounters between humans and colossal squid read like maritime legends. Fishing boats working the Southern Ocean occasionally haul up specimens that have grasped onto hooked fish, their grips so tenacious that they're pulled to the surface still holding their intended meal. These accidental captures have provided science with most of what we know about these creatures, each specimen a treasure trove of biological mysteries hauled up from depths that remain largely unexplored. Consider the eyes of a colossal squid, dinner plates of vision that represent the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. Each eye measures up to 30 centimeters across, evolved to gather every available photon in their lightless world. These organs can detect the faintest bioluminescent flash from kilometers away, turning the colossal squid into a living deep-sea surveillance system, watching and waiting in the eternal darkness. When damaged in the brutal encounters that define life in the deep ocean, colossal squid can regenerate their tentacles completely, regrowing these complex appendages with their intricate hook systems over the course of several months. This regenerative ability means that many of the battle-scarred specimens scientists examine are actually healed veterans of encounters we can only imagine. The ultimate expression of the colossal squid's place in the deep ocean ecosystem plays out in their legendary battles with sperm whales. These encounters represent one of nature's most epic confrontations, a chess match between 2 apex predators in the crushing depths. Sperm whales dive to hunt these squid, but the squid don't surrender easily, turning each hunt into a battle that can last hours and leave both combatants scarred for life. Picture this: you're a medieval sailor, 3 weeks out from any familiar coastline, when something the size of a church spire erupts from the black water beside your vessel. Tentacles thick as tree trunks wrap around your mast, while a beak large enough to bite a man in half snaps at the air just above your head. Welcome to every kraken story ever whispered in seaside taverns, where fact and fiction swirled together like sea foam in a storm. For centuries, these tales seemed like pure fantasy. Sure, occasionally a fisherman would haul up a tentacle longer than his boat, or a chunk of rubbery flesh would wash ashore after a particularly violent storm. But the full creature? The legendary kraken that could drag entire ships to the depths, that remained firmly in the realm of maritime mythology, filed away next to mermaids and sea serpents. Then came the age of deep-sea exploration, and suddenly those tavern tales didn't seem quite so far-fetched. The first confirmed giant squid specimen was discovered in 1857, though it was hardly in pristine condition after washing up on a Danish beach. More tantalizing evidence trickled in throughout the following decades. Massive beaks found in sperm whale stomachs, colossal tentacle sections pulled from fishing nets, and always, that nagging sense that something truly enormous was lurking in the planet's deepest waters. The breakthrough came in 2004, when Japanese researchers captured the first photographs of a living giant squid in its natural habitat. 2 years later, they managed to film one. Suddenly, the kraken stepped out of legend and into the harsh light of scientific scrutiny, revealing secrets that were somehow even more fascinating than the myths. Let's talk about how these animals actually move through their underwater realm. The giant squid's propulsion system is a masterpiece of biological engineering centered around that massive mantle, the muscular sac that houses most of the animal's vital organs. Water gets drawn into this mantle cavity through openings along the sides, then expelled forcefully through a flexible siphon that acts like a living jet engine. This isn't the gentle drifting you might expect from such a large creature. When a giant squid needs to move quickly, perhaps to escape a predator or pursue prey, it can shoot backward through the water with surprising speed, that enormous body undulating through the darkness like something from another world entirely. But the real engineering marvel lies in the squid's weaponry. Those 8 arms that inspired so many sea monster stories each contain hundreds of suckers, and each sucker is ringed with sharp, chitinous teeth that can lock onto prey with crushing force. Then there are the 2 hunting tentacles, longer and more specialized than the arms, equipped with enlarged clubs at their tips that can shoot out like biological harpoons to snare prey at distances that would make a human archer jealous. The feeding process is equally dramatic. Once those tentacles have secured a target, the arms take over, drawing the prey toward a beak that could easily crack open a lobster shell. This isn't the gentle grazing of a filter feeder. This is active, aggressive predation happening in the planet's most remote reaches, where the pressure would crush a human instantly and the darkness is absolute. Perhaps most mysteriously, we know almost nothing about their reproduction. Giant squid eggs have been discovered drifting in the deep ocean, massive gelatinous masses that can measure several feet across and contain thousands of developing embryos. But where exactly do these animals mate? How do they find each other in the vast emptiness of the deep sea? These questions remain largely unanswered. The scarcity of specimens continues to frustrate scientists. Despite decades of searching, complete giant squids remain incredibly rare finds. Most of what we know comes from partial remains, damaged carcasses, or those precious few moments of footage captured by deep-sea cameras. Genetic analysis of the specimens we do have suggests something remarkable. Rather than being composed of many separate species, giant squids around the world appear to be part of one enormous, globally distributed population, somehow maintaining genetic connectivity across the planet's deepest waters. In the twilight depths of our planet's most ancient highways, where currents have carved invisible roads for millions of years, moves a creature that seems assembled from the dreams of both reptile and whale. The leatherback sea turtle drifts through these liquid corridors like a living fossil wrapped in midnight blue leather, carrying secrets that predate the continents themselves. Picture, if you will, a creature the size of a small boat, 6 feet from nose to tail, weighing as much as a grand piano. But this is no ordinary turtle. Where its cousins wear shells of bone and keratin, the leatherback has chosen a different path entirely. Its carapace flows like molded rubber, 7 ridges running along its back like the ribs of some ancient vessel. This isn't armor in the traditional sense, it's something far more elegant. Thousands of tiny bone plates lie embedded beneath that leathery skin, creating a flexible fortress that bends with the ocean's rhythm rather than fighting against it. The leather itself tells a story of adaptation beyond our wildest engineering dreams. Touch it, and you'd find it warm remarkably, impossibly warm for a reptile swimming in waters that would numb human flesh in minutes. Here lies one of nature's most remarkable innovations, a cold-blooded creature that has learned to kindle its own internal fire. The leatherback's massive bulk serves as a living furnace, its powerful swimming muscles generating heat that spreads through specialized blood vessels, keeping its core temperature a full 18 degrees warmer than the surrounding sea. This thermal mastery opens doors that remain forever closed to other reptiles. While their cousins bask on sun-warmed rocks, leatherbacks dive into the planet's coldest waters, descending deeper than any other turtle dares venture. They've been tracked diving over 4,000 feet down, into realms where sunlight has never touched, following the vertical migrations of their translucent prey through columns of increasing pressure and eternal darkness. And what draws them into these alien depths? Jellyfish. Thousands upon thousands of jellyfish. The leatherback has built its entire existence around these floating phantoms, following invisible seasons of bloom and abundance across ocean basins wider than continents. They surf the great currents, the Gulf Stream, the Kuroshio, the mighty circulation systems that connect every corner of our blue planet, timing their journeys to coincide with jellyfish blooms that paint the water in ghostly clouds of pulsing tissue. Watch a leatherback feed, and you witness something both graceful and primordial. Their throats bristle with backward-pointing spines, biological fishhooks that ensure no slippery meal escapes once swallowed. They can consume their own body weight in jellyfish daily, processing hundreds of these watery phantoms with methodical patience. It's a lifestyle that requires crossing entire ocean basins, following regional foraging loops that span thousands of miles, connecting feeding grounds in ways that make our own global supply chains seem quaint by comparison. But these ancient mariners now navigate waters filled with modern dangers their evolution never anticipated. Nighttime beaches, once guided by starlight and lunar glow, now blaze with artificial illumination that sends newly hatched turtles crawling toward parking lots instead of the sea. Street lamps and beachfront developments create false dawns that disorient creatures whose navigation systems were calibrated when darkness still meant something. And in the depths where they hunt, plastic bags drift like synthetic jellyfish, perfect mimics that fool senses honed across 60 million years. A leatherback cannot distinguish between the pulse of living tissue and the flutter of discarded grocery bags. They swallow our refuse with the same methodical patience they once reserved for their natural prey, their ancient wisdom no match for our modern carelessness. Yet still they swim, these leather-wrapped giants, carrying forward an unbroken chain of existence that stretches back to when the Atlantic was young and narrow. In their unhurried passage through waters both ancient and polluted, they remind us that some stories are larger than our brief moment in time-living libraries, whose pages are written in the patient language of currents, tides, and the endless, faithful return to beaches their ancestors knew when mammals were still small and scared. In the twilight depths of our planet's most ancient highways, where currents have carved invisible roads for millions of years, moves a creature that seems assembled from the dreams of both reptile and whale. The leatherback sea turtle drifts through these liquid corridors like a living fossil wrapped in midnight blue leather, carrying secrets that predate the continents themselves. Picture, if you will, a creature the size of a small boat, 6 feet from nose to tail, weighing as much as a grand piano. But this is no ordinary turtle. Where its cousins wear shells of bone and keratin, the leatherback has chosen a different path entirely. Its carapace flows like molded rubber, 7 ridges running along its back like the ribs of some ancient vessel. This isn't armor in the traditional sense, it's something far more elegant. Thousands of tiny bone plates lie embedded beneath that leathery skin, creating a flexible fortress that bends with the ocean's rhythm rather than fighting against it. The leather itself tells a story of adaptation beyond our wildest engineering dreams. Touch it, and you'd find it warm remarkably, impossibly warm for a reptile swimming in waters that would numb human flesh in minutes. Here lies one of nature's most remarkable innovations, a cold-blooded creature that has learned to kindle its own internal fire. The leatherback's massive bulk serves as a living furnace, its powerful swimming muscles generating heat that spreads through specialized blood vessels, keeping its core temperature a full 18 degrees warmer than the surrounding sea. This thermal mastery opens doors that remain forever closed to other reptiles. While their cousins bask on sun-warmed rocks, leatherbacks dive into the planet's coldest waters, descending deeper than any other turtle dares venture. They've been tracked diving over 4,000 feet down, into realms where sunlight has never touched, following the vertical migrations of their translucent prey through columns of increasing pressure and eternal darkness. And what draws them into these alien depths? Jellyfish. Thousands upon thousands of jellyfish. The leatherback has built its entire existence around these floating phantoms, following invisible seasons of bloom and abundance across ocean basins wider than continents. They surf the great currents, the Gulf Stream, the Kuroshio, the mighty circulation systems that connect every corner of our blue planet, timing their journeys to coincide with jellyfish blooms that paint the water in ghostly clouds of pulsing tissue. Watch a leatherback feed, and you witness something both graceful and primordial. Their throats bristle with backward-pointing spines, biological fishhooks that ensure no slippery meal escapes once swallowed. They can consume their own body weight in jellyfish daily, processing hundreds of these watery phantoms with methodical patience. It's a lifestyle that requires crossing entire ocean basins, following regional foraging loops that span thousands of miles, connecting feeding grounds in ways that make our own global supply chains seem quaint by comparison. But these ancient mariners now navigate waters filled with modern dangers their evolution never anticipated. Nighttime beaches, once guided by starlight and lunar glow, now blaze with artificial illumination that sends newly hatched turtles crawling toward parking lots instead of the sea. Street lamps and beachfront developments create false dawns that disorient creatures whose navigation systems were calibrated when darkness still meant something. And in the depths where they hunt, plastic bags drift like synthetic jellyfish, perfect mimics that fool senses honed across 60 million years. A leatherback cannot distinguish between the pulse of living tissue and the flutter of discarded grocery bags. They swallow our refuse with the same methodical patience they once reserved for their natural prey, their ancient wisdom no match for our modern carelessness. Yet still they swim, these leather-wrapped giants, carrying forward an unbroken chain of existence that stretches back to when the Atlantic was young and narrow. In their unhurried passage through waters both ancient and polluted, they remind us that some stories are larger than our brief moment in time-living libraries, whose pages are written in the patient language of currents, tides, and the endless, faithful return to beaches their ancestors knew when mammals were still small and scared. The sun hangs low over the Serengeti, casting long shadows beneath scattered acacia trees. In this vast theater of golden grass, where the horizon seems to stretch beyond the edge of the world, the largest land mammals on Earth begin their ancient evening ritual. African savanna elephants emerge from the shade like living monuments, their grey forms moving with surprising grace across terrain that has remained unchanged for millennia. These magnificent creatures can weigh up to 6 tons, yet they step through the grassland with deliberate care, each footfall creating pathways that smaller animals will follow for generations. Their ears, broad as dinner tables, fan slowly in the cooling air, while wrinkled skin tells stories of countless seasons beneath the African sun. At the heart of every elephant herd stands the matriarch, often the oldest female, whose decades of accumulated wisdom guide her family through droughts, migrations, and the subtle dangers that lurk in this seemingly peaceful landscape. She remembers where the sweetest fruits ripen, which waterholes survive the harshest dry seasons, and how to read the shifting moods of the sky. Her daughters, sisters, and their offspring follow her lead in a complex social structure that has evolved over millions of years. These family groups can number anywhere from 3 to 20 individuals, bound together by relationships so intricate that researchers are still unraveling their mysteries. Young elephants learn not just where to find food, but how to be elephant, how to comfort a distressed family member, how to celebrate a birth, even how to mourn their dead. When a matriarch passes away, her daughters don't simply assume leadership, they carry forward her knowledge like a living library, passed down through generations without written word. The elephant's trunk, perhaps nature's most versatile appendage, contains over 40,000 muscles working in perfect coordination. This remarkable organ can lift a 2-ton log or delicately pluck a single blade of grass. It serves as hand, nose, snorkel, and communication device all in one. Watch an elephant use its trunk to comfort a calf, wrapping it gently around the young one's body, and you witness tenderness that transcends species boundaries. Inside that trunk, specialized muscles can create suction powerful enough to draw up several gallons of water at once, or precise enough to select individual seeds from the ground. The tip, with its finger-like projections, possesses sensitivity rival to human fingertips, capable of detecting texture, temperature, and chemical composition of objects too small for our eyes to discern. But perhaps most remarkable is how elephants speak to each other across distances that would challenge our loudest shouts. Through infrasound, low-frequency vibrations below the range of human hearing, elephants maintain contact across several miles of savanna. These deep rumbles, felt more than heard, carry messages of location, emotional state, and even complex social information through the ground itself. A matriarch's warning call can alert scattered family members to approaching danger, while her greeting rumbles welcome relatives returning from distant foraging. During mating season, these infrasonic conversations become a complex courtship language, allowing potential partners to assess each other's suitability across vast distances. As ecosystem engineers, elephants reshape their environment with every step. Their trails become highways for countless other species. Their feeding habits create clearings where new plant communities can establish themselves. By knocking down trees and clearing undergrowth, they maintain the delicate balance between forest and grassland that defines the African savanna. Seeds pass through their digestive systems and are deposited miles from parent plants, complete with natural fertilizer. Some tree species have evolved specifically to take advantage of elephant digestion, producing fruits that only germinate after passing through an elephant's gut. Without these gentle giants, entire ecosystems would slowly transform into something entirely different. Yet this ancient relationship faces unprecedented challenges. The ivory trade, driven by demand thousands of miles away, has decimated elephant populations across Africa. Entire family groups have been destroyed, their social knowledge lost forever. Conservation efforts now focus on transfrontier parks, vast protected areas that cross national boundaries, allowing elephants to follow traditional migration routes that have sustained them for countless generations. Tonight, as darkness settles over the grassland, these remarkable creatures continue their timeless journey across the African landscape, carrying with them millions of years of evolutionary wisdom. Picture yourself drifting silently through a mangrove channel at dawn, where brackish water meets ancient roots in a cathedral of green. The air hangs thick with salt and possibility, and somewhere in these shadowed waters lurks one of Earth's most perfectly evolved predators. The saltwater crocodile, stretching up to 6 meters of prehistoric power, has remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. While dinosaurs rose and fell, while continents shifted and ice ages came and went, these armored emperors of the estuary simply waited. They are living time capsules, carrying the blueprint of survival in every scale, every tooth, every patient amber eye that breaks the surface tension like a periscope from prehistory. In the dappled light filtering through mangrove leaves, you might mistake that floating log for driftwood, until it moves with the fluid grace of something that has mastered the art of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Now, let's talk about those jaws. Perhaps the most remarkable crushing mechanism nature has ever devised. A saltwater crocodile's bite generates approximately 3,700 pounds of pressure per square inch. To put this in perspective, that's roughly 15 times stronger than a human bite, 3 times more powerful than a great white shark, and enough force to snap a small boat in half. The physics behind this devastating power lies in their jaw muscles, which work like biological hydraulic systems. The crocodile's skull acts as a force multiplier, with jaw muscles that extend deep into the back of their head, creating leverage that transforms relatively modest muscle contractions into bone-crushing pressure. Their teeth, up to 68 of them, aren't designed for chewing but for gripping and holding. Each tooth is conical, slightly curved backward, and when one breaks or wears down, another grows to replace it. A single crocodile might go through 3,000 teeth in its lifetime. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. While their closing bite is devastatingly powerful, the muscles that open their jaws are relatively weak. A person could theoretically hold a crocodile's mouth shut with their bare hands, though we definitely don't recommend testing this theory. This asymmetry reflects their hunting strategy perfectly. They need tremendous power to clamp down on prey, but once those jaws close, the victim isn't going anywhere. Despite their fearsome reputation on land, saltwater crocodiles are surprisingly graceful swimmers. Those webbed feet that look almost comical on shore become precision instruments underwater. They can hold their breath for up to an hour, using their tail like a massive rudder, while their webbed feet provide fine-tuned steering. Their swimming style is almost serpentine. That powerful tail propels them forward with undulating waves while their legs fold neatly against their body to reduce drag. They're capable of what scientists call high walk and belly run on land, but in water, they transform into something altogether more elegant. They can leap vertically out of the water, their entire body clearing the surface in an explosive display that would make a dolphin envious. This isn't showboating, it's a hunting technique, allowing them to snatch birds and small mammals from overhanging branches. Perhaps most surprisingly, these apex predators are devoted parents. Mother crocodiles guard their nests with fierce dedication for up to 90 days, rarely leaving to eat. When the eggs begin to hatch, the babies make high-pitched chirping sounds from within their shells, a prehistoric lullaby that calls their mother to carefully dig them out. She then gently carries dozens of her offspring to water in her massive jaws, the same weapons capable of crushing bone now cradling new life with remarkable tenderness. For thousands of years, humans have shared waterways with these ancient giants. In Australia's Arnhem Land, Aboriginal peoples speak of crocodiles as ancestral beings, creatures whose dreams shaped the very rivers they inhabit. Similar reverence exists along the Andaman coasts, where local fishing communities have developed an intricate understanding of crocodile behavior, reading the water's surface like a book written in ripples and shadows. These stories remind us that coexistence is possible, built on respect, understanding, and the recognition that some creatures have earned their place at the top of the food chain through millions of years of patient evolution. In the frigid reaches, where civilization fades to memory, two titans reign supreme over landscapes sculpted by ice and time. The Kodiak bear and polar bear represent nature's most impressive experiments in mammalian gigantism, each perfectly calibrated for their respective frozen kingdoms. These northern giants embody different evolutionary strategies for surviving in some of Earth's most unforgiving environments, where size isn't just an advantage, it's often the difference between life and death. The Kodiak brown bear prowls the salmon-rich coastlines of Alaska's Kodiak archipelago, where abundance has sculpted these creatures into living monuments. Adult males regularly tip the scales at 800 to 1,500 pounds, with exceptional individuals reaching nearly 2,000 pounds of pure muscle and fat. Their massive frames lumber through coastal meadows and riverbanks with surprising grace, supported by paws the size of dinner plates. These bears have evolved alongside the Pacific's seasonal bounty, developing an almost supernatural ability to predict salmon runs and berry seasons. Their thick, chocolate-colored fur ripples over shoulders that could dwarf a small car, while their elongated snouts house an olfactory system capable of detecting a rotting fish from miles away. The Kodiak's size advantage becomes most apparent during the autumn feeding frenzy, when dominant males command the prime fishing spots along waterfalls and river mouths, their sheer presence enough to send smaller competitors retreating into the wilderness. Meanwhile, the polar bear has taken a radically different evolutionary path, becoming a nomadic ice walker perfectly adapted for life atop the Arctic Ocean's frozen surface. These bears represent the largest terrestrial carnivore on Earth, with adult males averaging between 900 and 1,600 pounds, though their lean build creates an illusion of even greater size. Their distinctive cream-colored fur isn't actually white, but consists of hollow, transparent hairs that trap warm air and reflect light, creating both insulation and camouflage against the endless ice. Beneath this remarkable fur lies black skin that absorbs any available solar radiation, while their enormous paws function as natural snowshoes, distributing their considerable weight across thin ice. Polar bears possess an almost supernatural patience, capable of waiting motionless for hours beside sealed breathing holes, their metabolism slowed to conserve energy in an environment where calories are precious and unpredictable. Both species exhibit hyperphagia, a biological phenomenon where bears consume enormous quantities of food during peak availability periods. This isn't simple gluttony, but rather an evolutionary survival mechanism refined over millions of years. During salmon season, a Kodiak bear might consume 40 fish per day, packing on hundreds of pounds of fat that will sustain them through winter's scarcity. Polar bears demonstrate even more extreme feast or famine adaptations, capable of fasting for up to 8 months, while living entirely off stored body fat. Their hibernation physiology borders on the miraculous pregnant females dig maternity dens in snowdrifts, where they give birth to cubs the size of hamsters, nursing them through winter while their own bodies slowly consume muscle and fat reserves. During this period, their heart rate drops to as low as 8 beats per minute, and their breathing becomes barely perceptible whispers in the darkness. Climate change has fundamentally altered these ancient feeding patterns, particularly for polar bears whose hunting grounds literally melt beneath their paws. Shrinking sea ice forces longer swimming distances between feeding areas, while earlier spring thaws shorten the critical hunting season when seals are most accessible. Some populations now face unprecedented challenges as traditional ice highways disappear, forcing bears to venture into human settlements in desperate searches for food. Indigenous cultures throughout the Arctic have long recognized these bears as spiritual beings deserving profound respect. Inuit folklore speaks of bears as transformed humans, while native Alaskan traditions view encounters with these giants as messages from the spirit world, requiring specific protocols and offerings. Modern ecotourism now brings thousands of visitors to witness these magnificent creatures, raising important questions about observation ethics and habitat preservation in an age of accelerating environmental change. In the endless expanse of the Southern Ocean, where waves roll unbroken around the bottom of the world, there exists a creature that has mastered the art of perpetual motion. The wandering albatross, with wings that stretch nearly 4 meters from tip to tip, represents perhaps the most elegant solution to the problem of covering vast distances with minimal effort. These magnificent birds don't simply fly, they dance with the wind itself. Through a technique called dynamic soaring, wandering albatrosses exploit the differences in wind speed at various altitudes above the ocean's surface. They climb into faster-moving air currents, then dive back down toward the waves, converting that speed differential into forward momentum. It's a form of aerial surfing that allows them to travel hundreds of kilometers without a single wing beat, riding the roaring 40s and furious 50s like maritime ghosts. What makes this even more remarkable is the sheer scale of their journeys. A single wandering albatross might circumnavigate the entire Southern Ocean multiple times in a single year, covering distances that would span continents. Young birds, once they leave their nests, may not touch land again for 5 to 10 years, spending their entire adolescence gliding over the waves in an endless search for food. But perhaps the most touching aspect of these oceanic wanderers is their approach to love. Wandering albatrosses mate for life, forming pair bonds that can last for decades. When breeding season arrives, these normally solitary creatures return to the same windswept islands where they were born, often to the exact same patch of tussock grass where they've nested for years. Their courtship rituals are elaborate, fair-synchronized dances involving wing spreading, bill clapping, and calls that echo across the colony like ancient songs. The female lays a single, precious egg, and both parents take turns incubating it during the long months of the southern winter. When the chick finally hatches, it will remain in the nest for nearly a year, one of the longest childhood periods of any bird. During this time, the parents embark on foraging trips that can last weeks, traveling thousands of kilometers to find squid and fish in the nutrient-rich waters where different ocean currents collide. These epic journeys, however, have become increasingly perilous. Long-line fishing vessels trail hooks baited with fish across vast areas of ocean, and albatrosses, drawn by what appears to be an easy meal, often become accidentally caught and drowned. For decades, this bycatch represented one of the greatest threats to albatross populations worldwide. The sight of these magnificent birds, designed for a lifetime of flight, pulled beneath the waves by fishing lines, became a symbol of humanity's unintended impact on the natural world. Fortunately, conservation efforts have begun to turn the tide. Simple modifications to fishing practices using bird-scaring lines, setting hooks at night when albatrosses are less active, and waiting lines to sink them quickly have dramatically reduced albatross deaths. Some fishing fleets have reported reductions in bycatch of over 90%, proving that solutions exist when there's will to implement them. Meanwhile, on remote islands like Gough Island in the South Atlantic, restoration projects are addressing another threat. Introduced mice, seemingly harmless, had grown to enormous sizes in the absence of natural predators and began attacking albatross chicks in their nests. Teams of conservationists have worked to eliminate these invasive rodents, giving albatross colonies a chance to recover in peace. The wandering albatross reminds us that being among the largest doesn't always mean being the most robust. These birds, with their incredible wingspans and decade-spanning lives, represent a kind of biological poetry, creatures so perfectly adapted to their environment that they seem to exist in harmony with the very forces of nature itself. In their endless circuits around the southern seas, they trace invisible paths that connect distant continents, living embodiments of the planet's wild, interconnected vastness. Picture yourself standing on a Kalahari dune at dawn, watching the horizon shimmer in that peculiar way desert air does when it's caught between night's coolness and day's approaching heat. The landscape stretches endlessly, dotted with sparse vegetation and the occasional acacia tree casting long, delicate shadows across red sand. This is where you'll encounter one of Earth's most remarkable contradictions: a bird that abandoned the skies millions of years ago, yet moves across the ground with breathtaking grace and terrifying speed. The ostrich emerges from this harsh landscape like something from another world, standing nearly 3 meters tall, its neck swaying with an almost hypnotic rhythm as it surveys its domain. These aren't just large birds, they're evolutionary marvels that have turned flightlessness into an art form. When an ostrich decides to run, and they often do, you're witnessing one of nature's most spectacular displays of terrestrial speed. At 70 kilometers per hour, an ostrich in full sprint moves like liquid across the desert floor. Their legs, impossibly long and muscular, carry them in bounds that can span 5 meters with each stride. Those powerful limbs aren't just for show. Each foot ends in a single, massive toe equipped with a claw that serves as both weapon and anchor point for their incredible acceleration. The physics are almost absurd. A bird weighing over 100 kilograms moving faster than most humans can drive through a residential neighborhood, all powered by pure muscle and millions of years of evolutionary refinement. What makes this speed possible lies hidden beneath their distinctive black and white plumage. Ostrich bones are marvels of biological engineering, honeycombed with air pockets that make them simultaneously lightweight and incredibly strong. These pneumatic bones reduce the bird's overall weight without sacrificing structural integrity. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper that's both tall and light enough to dance. The ostrich's skeleton manages this impossible balance, creating a frame that can withstand the enormous forces generated during high-speed running, while remaining agile enough for sudden direction changes that would snap the legs of lesser creatures. Their breathing system rivals that of any high-performance athlete. Air sacs connected to their lungs create a continuous flow of oxygen through their bodies, ensuring their massive leg muscles never lack the fuel needed for sustained sprinting. It's a respiratory system that would make a marathon runner weep with envy, perfectly adapted for life in environments where the ability to outrun predators or simply cover vast distances in search of food and water means the difference between survival and becoming someone else's dinner. The social dynamics of ostrich life reveal another layer of complexity. During breeding season, males establish territories and create elaborate nest-simple scrapes in the ground that become the center of intricate domestic arrangements. Here's where things get interesting. A single dominant female, called the major hen, will lay her eggs in the nest, but she's often joined by several minor hens who contribute their own eggs to the communal nursery. The result is a nest that might contain 20 or more eggs, each weighing about as much as 2 dozen chicken eggs. The male takes on most of the incubation duties, his dark plumage providing perfect camouflage as he settles over the nest during daylight hours. At night, the major hen takes her turn, her lighter coloring blending with moonlit sand. It's a tag-team approach to parenting that maximizes the chances of at least some eggs surviving the attention of predators, harsh weather, and the countless other dangers that threaten ground-nesting birds in open country. Perhaps no ostrich myth is more persistent than the image of these birds burying their heads in sand when frightened. The reality is far more practical and considerably less foolish. When threatened, ostriches often lower their heads close to the ground, using their excellent eyesight to monitor potential dangers while keeping their profile low. From a distance, this behavior might create the illusion of a buried head, but it's actually a sensible surveillance strategy employed by an animal that needs to balance caution with awareness. Human relationships with ostriches have evolved from hunting to farming, with commercial ostrich operations now producing leather prized for its distinctive bumpy texture and meat that's surprisingly lean and flavorful. Wild populations, once severely depleted, have shown remarkable recovery in protected areas, proving that these ancient sprinters still have an important role to play in their desert ecosystems. Beneath the shifting ceiling of Arctic pack ice, where sunlight fractures into dancing blue-green corridors, swims one of the ocean's most enigmatic residents. The narwhal moves through these frozen waters like a living myth, its spiraled tusk cutting silently through the darkness. For centuries, this creature existed at the boundary between reality and legend, its horn washing ashore in medieval Europe to fuel tales of unicorns. But the truth of the narwhal proves far more fascinating than any fairy tale. In the perpetual twilight of Arctic winter, when ice forms a solid barrier between water and sky, narwhals gather in small pods, their mottled grey bodies perfectly camouflaged against the dappled light filtering through the frozen surface above. These are among the deepest diving whales on Earth, capable of descending over a mile beneath the ice, where pressure would crush most other creatures. Yet they move with an almost ethereal grace, their movements slow and deliberate, conserving energy in waters that hover just above freezing. The narwhal's tusk, that impossible spiral of ivory that can grow longer than a grown man is tall, has puzzled scientists for generations. Only males possess this extraordinary appendage, and not all males at that. Recent research has revealed the tusk's true nature. It's essentially an inside-out tooth, packed with millions of nerve endings that make it one of the most sensitive organs in the animal kingdom. Through this living antenna, a narwhal can detect the slightest changes in water pressure, temperature, and salinity. It can sense the approach of other whales from miles away, feel the subtle currents that indicate breathing holes in the ice above, and even detect the electrical fields generated by potential prey hiding in the sediment below. But the tusk serves another purpose entirely. Male narwhals engage in a behavior called tusking, gently crossing their ivory spears in what appears to be a form of social interaction rather than combat. These encounters seem almost ritualistic, like a handshake between old friends, as the whales share information about their travels, their health, and their experiences through the sensitive nerve networks in their tusks. The narwhal's world is built on sound. In the darkness beneath the ice, echolocation becomes their primary sense. They produce a symphony of clicks, whistles, and calls that bounce off ice formations, sea floor, and swimming prey, painting detailed acoustic pictures of their surroundings. Their clicks are remarkably precise. They can distinguish between different types of fish, detect air pockets in the ice ceiling above, and navigate through underwater canyons with extraordinary accuracy. Each narwhal's call signature is unique, allowing family members to recognize each other across vast distances in the polar darkness. During the harshest months of Arctic winter, when the ice sheet extends its grip across the northern seas, narwhals depend entirely on polynyas, areas of open water that remain unfrozen due to ocean currents or wind patterns. These breathing holes become lifelines, gathering spots where dozens of narwhals surface together, their tusks breaking the surface like periscopes before their sleek heads emerge to breathe. The whales seem to understand the ice's behavior intimately, somehow knowing which polynyas will remain open and which will seal shut, trapping any creature unlucky enough to be caught beneath solid ice. For the Inuit peoples of the Arctic, narwhals have always been more than just another whale species. They are deeply woven into cultural traditions, spiritual beliefs, and survival strategies that stretch back thousands of years. Inuit hunters possess an almost supernatural understanding of narwhal behavior, passed down through generations of careful observation. They know when the whales will arrive, where they will surface, and how the changing seasons affect their movements. The narwhal provides not just sustenance, its meat rich in vitamins essential for Arctic survival, but materials for tools, oil for lamps, and ivory for carving. As Arctic ice patterns shift and ocean temperatures rise, narwhals face an uncertain future. These creatures, so perfectly adapted to their frozen world, find their habitat changing faster than they can adapt. Traditional migration routes become blocked or altered, ancestral feeding grounds warm beyond recognition, and the delicate balance of Arctic ecosystems teeters on the edge of transformation. The tusked phantom of the north continues its ancient dance beneath the ice, but the stage itself grows smaller with each passing year. Picture yourself floating in warm tropical waters 3 million years ago. The Miocene epoch stretches endlessly around you and ocean world, where continents still shift like puzzle pieces finding their places. These ancient seas shimmer with life, but something else moves beneath the surface, something that dwarfs every predator you've ever imagined. Meet Carcharodontes megalodon, not just a shark, but the apex predator that ruled these waters for nearly 14 million years. 60 tons of pure hunting machine, stretching almost 60 feet from nose to tail. To put that in perspective, a modern great white would fit comfortably in Meg's mouth twice over. This wasn't just nature being dramatic, this was nature writing the ultimate predator story in salt water and serrated teeth. The first clue to Meg's existence came from those teeth, massive, triangular monuments to destruction that early humans mistook for dragon tongues fallen from the sky. Each tooth could span your entire hand, designed with microscopic serrations that turned feeding into an art form of efficient brutality. Scientists have reconstructed entire jaw sets from these fossilized remnants, creating cathedral-sized mouths that could generate bite forces exceeding 180,000 pounds per square inch. That's roughly 10 times stronger than a T-Rex, applied through rows of teeth that replaced themselves continuously throughout the shark's lifetime. But Meg wasn't just about size, it was about intelligence in hunting. Recent discoveries of nursery sites reveal sophisticated behavioral patterns that challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistoric predators. These weren't mindless eating machines prowling random waters. Megalodon mothers selected specific coastal areas, warm, shallow seas perfect for raising young away from adult competitors who might view baby Megs as convenient snacks rather than offspring to protect. The Gatun Formation in Panama has become our window into these ancient nurseries. Here, paleontologists uncover tiny Meg teeth still enormous by modern standards, alongside the remains of their preferred prey. These juvenile sharks grew up hunting primitive whales, early dolphins, and massive sea turtles in what can only be described as prehistoric finishing schools for apex predation. The concentration of teeth in these areas suggests Meg mothers returned to the same nursery sites generation after generation, creating dynasties of predators that ruled specific territories for millions of years. Yet for all its dominance, Megalodon faced an enemy it couldn't bite, couldn't chase, couldn't intimidate into submission: climate change. As the Miocene gave way to the Pliocene, ocean temperatures began their slow, inexorable decline. The warm, tropical seas that had supported Meg's massive prey base started cooling, triggering a cascade of ecological changes that would prove fatal to the giant shark. The hypothesis sounds almost mundane for such a legendary predator's downfall. Cooling oceans meant smaller whale populations. Smaller whales meant less food. Less food meant a 60-ton predator couldn't maintain its energy requirements. But the reality was far more complex and devastating. As temperatures dropped, entire ecosystems shifted. The great baleen whales that had sustained Meg populations began migrating to polar regions, following food sources that could tolerate colder water. Meanwhile, smaller, more efficient predators like the ancestors of modern great whites thrived in these changing conditions. Meg's size, once its greatest advantage, became its evolutionary death sentence. The same massive body that had made it ocean royalty now demanded resources that a cooling world could no longer provide. By 2.6 million years ago, the last megalodon had vanished from the fossil record, leaving behind only those incredible teeth and our enduring fascination with what it means to be the largest predator our planet has ever seen. The shadow of Meg stretches across deep time, reminding us that even the most perfectly adapted predators aren't immune to the slow, grinding power of environmental change. In those ancient Miocene seas, nothing could challenge Megalodon's reign. But the ocean itself had the final word, as it always does, patient and inexorable as the tides that once carried these giants through their vanished world. Picture the oceans of 15 million years ago, when the waters ran deeper and darker than today's seas. In these ancient depths swam a creature so formidable that even the mighty Megalodon gave it a wide berth. This was Livyatan melvilli, named after the biblical sea monster and Herman Melville's white whale, a beast that made Moby Dick look like a goldfish in comparison. Livyatan stretched nearly 60 feet from nose to tail, a sperm whale's cousin built not for diving deep and hunting squid, but for something far more ambitious. This was a whale designed to hunt other whales. Its massive skull housed a brain that calculated hunting strategies, while its powerful tail drove it through the water at speeds that would make modern orcas envious. But it was the teeth that truly set Livyatan apart from anything swimming in today's oceans. Those teeth measured 36 centimeters long. To put that in perspective, imagine a ruler and a half, except this ruler was shaped like a curved dagger and sharp enough to slice through whale blubber like butter. Each tooth was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, perfectly designed for gripping and tearing flesh from prey that could weigh as much as a modern blue whale. The roots of these teeth extended deep into the jaw, anchored like foundation pillars to withstand the tremendous forces generated when Livyatan clamped down on its victims. Unlike modern sperm whales, which have teeth only in their lower jaw, Livyatan bristled with these massive dental weapons in both upper and lower jaws. When its mouth closed, these teeth interlocked like the jaws of a bear trap, creating a cage of bone and enamel from which no prey could escape. The bite force generated by this arrangement would have been astronomical, easily capable of crushing the ribs of smaller whales or severing the spine of larger ones with a single decisive chomp. But what did such a magnificently armed predator choose to hunt? The answer lies in the abundance of baleen whales that populated the Miocene seas. These gentle giants, ancestors of today's blue whales, right whales, and humpbacks, filtered vast quantities of krill and small fish through their baleen plates, growing fat and slow in the process. To Livyatan, they represented floating buffets, massive packages of protein and blubber that could sustain a giant predator for weeks. Livyatan's hunting strategy likely involved ambush attacks, using its intelligence to predict the movements of baleen whale pods. It would have approached from below, or from the blind spots created by a baleen whale's positioning while feeding. Once within striking distance, Livyatan would have used its superior speed and agility to latch onto its prey, those massive teeth finding purchase in flesh and blubber, while the victims struggled helplessly. The ancient oceans were crowded hunting grounds, and Livyatan wasn't the only apex predator stalking these waters. Megalodon, the giant shark that has captured modern imaginations, shared these seas and competed for similar prey. Where their ranges overlapped, tense encounters surely occurred. Adult megalodons could reach similar sizes to Livyatan, creating a standoff between two of evolution's most perfect killing machines. Evidence suggests these titans may have avoided direct confrontation when possible, perhaps dividing territories or hunting grounds to minimize dangerous encounters. A battle between a fully grown Livyatan and Megalodon would have been a clash of equals, with no guaranteed winner, and both participants risking fatal injuries. The story of Livyatan comes to us from the Pisco Formation in Peru's coastal desert, where ancient seafloor sediments have been lifted and exposed by geological forces. Here, paleontologists discovered the fossilized skull that introduced the world to this remarkable predator. The preservation was extraordinary, allowing scientists to study not just the teeth and skull structure, but also to infer details about the creature's lifestyle and behavior. These Peruvian fossil beds represent a snapshot of an ancient ecosystem, a time capsule preserving the remains of creatures that ruled seas long before humans walked the earth. In those quiet desert sands lies evidence of a world where giants battled giants, where the oceans ran red with the struggles of titans we can barely imagine. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a vast Cretaceous floodplain, 95 million years ago. The air hangs thick and humid, heavy with the scent of cycads and primitive flowering plants. Rivers meander lazily across this ancient landscape, their banks lined with towering conifers and tree ferns that stretch toward a sun that seems somehow more intense, more alive than the one we know today. And then you see it. Moving slowly through this primordial garden, a shadow falls across the landscape that dwarfs everything around it. Argentinosaurus huinculensis, the silver lizard of Argentina, emerges from behind a grove of Araucarian pines like a living mountain deciding to take a stroll. At 30 meters in length, this gentle giant stretches longer than 3 school buses placed end to end. Standing nearly 20 meters tall at its highest point, it could peer over a 6-story building without lifting its head. And the weight, oh, the magnificent, impossible weight of it all. 90 tons of living, breathing dinosaur, equivalent to 15 African elephants rolled into one impossibly graceful form. But here's what makes your sleepy mind truly marvel. Despite its staggering size, Argentinosaurus moves with an almost meditative calm. Each footstep creates a deep, resonant thud that you feel as much as hear, sending ripples through nearby puddles and causing smaller creatures to pause in their daily routines. The ground doesn't shake violently, it simply acknowledges the presence of something truly monumental. What allowed this creature to achieve such incredible proportions? The secret lies hidden within its bones, in an elegant engineering solution that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. Deep inside those massive vertebrae, a network of air-filled chambers, pneumatic spaces that functioned like biological scaffolding. These hollow regions, connected to the respiratory system, reduced the weight of each vertebral bone by up to 60% while maintaining structural integrity. Imagine the spine of Argentinosaurus as a series of biological skyscrapers, each vertebra a carefully engineered tower with hollow chambers and internal buttresses. The neural spines alone, those tall, flat projections rising from each vertebra, stood taller than a human being. Yet for all their size, they remained surprisingly light, filled with air sacs that extended from the lungs throughout the body, creating a breathing, living framework that supported unimaginable weight. These pneumatic bones tell us something profound about how Argentinosaurus lived and moved. The air sac system didn't just reduce weight, it created a more efficient respiratory system, allowing this massive herbivore to process the enormous quantities of oxygen needed to fuel its mountain-sized metabolism. Following our gentle giant to its nesting grounds, we discover another marvel of prehistoric life. Argentinosaurus mothers gathered in communal nesting sites, scraping out shallow depressions in the warm soil near riverbanks. Here, they carefully arranged clutches of eggs, each one roughly the size of a football, in neat circular patterns. The eggs themselves were masterpieces of natural engineering, thick enough to support the weight of a brooding parent, yet thin enough for a baby sauropod to break free when the time came. These nesting sites became nurseries for an entire community, with multiple mothers sharing the responsibility of protecting and incubating their precious cargo. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery comes from examining the bone tissue itself under microscopic detail. The bone histology of Argentinosaurus reveals growth rings, like those found in trees, that tell the story of a remarkably patient childhood. Unlike many dinosaurs that grew rapidly to adult size, Argentinosaurus took its time, decades of steady, measured growth that gradually built these colossal frames. The bone tissue shows periods of fast growth alternating with slower phases, suggesting that even as juveniles, these dinosaurs followed the rhythm of their environment, growing more quickly during abundant seasons and slowing during lean times. This slow growth strategy required patience, but it produced the largest land animals our planet has ever known. As twilight settles over this ancient world, our Argentinosaurus continues its eternal search for the next meal, moving like a living cathedral through landscapes that time has forgotten, reminding us that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen very, very slowly. Picture yourself standing on the windswept steppes of Patagonia, where the endless grasslands stretch toward distant mountains like a green ocean frozen in time. This is Argentina's vast tableland, where the wind never stops whispering secrets from 100 million years ago. Back in the mid-Cretaceous, this wasn't the sparse, cattle-dotted landscape you'd recognize today. Instead, imagine a warm, humid world where massive rivers carved through lush forests filled with towering conifers and sprawling fern meadows. The air hung thick with moisture, and the ground trembled regularly not from earthquakes, but from the footsteps of the largest land animals that ever lived. In this ancient paradise roamed two absolute giants that make even our beloved Brontosaurus look like a house cat. Meet Patagotitan majorum and Dreadnoughtus shrani, two supersauropods locked in an eternal scientific rivalry for the title of biggest dinosaur ever discovered. Patagotitan, whose name literally means Patagonian Titan, was unearthed from the Cerro Barcino Formation and immediately sent paleontologists into a frenzy. With estimates suggesting it stretched over 100 feet from nose to tail and weighed as much as 12 African elephants, this creature was essentially a living skyscraper with legs. Meanwhile, Dreadnoughtus named after the early 20th century battleships, because nothing could threaten something so massive, represents our most complete supersauropod skeleton, giving us unprecedented insight into how these biological mountains actually lived and moved. But here's where things get deliciously complicated, in that wonderfully messy way that real science always unfolds. Discovering these titans isn't like finding a complete skeleton in your backyard. It's more like assembling the world's most expensive, fragile, and incomplete jigsaw puzzle while wearing oven mitts in a sandstorm. The field jacketing process alone is an engineering marvel that would make NASA jealous. Picture teams of paleontologists spending weeks carefully exposing each massive bone, then encasing them in protective plaster jackets that can weigh several tons. Moving a single Patagotitan vertebra requires specialized equipment, multiple vehicles, and the kind of logistical planning usually reserved for military operations. The femur alone, that's the thigh bone, stretches over 7 feet long and weighs nearly 500 pounds. Every extraction becomes a months-long expedition involving helicopters, custom-built crates, and the constant prayer that decades of work won't crumble during transport. The scientific debates surrounding these giants reveal just how challenging it is to estimate the body mass of creatures that push the absolute limits of terrestrial biology. Early estimates for Patagotitan suggested weights approaching 80 tons heavier than most blue whales, but subsequent studies have revised those numbers downward to a more modest 50 to 60 tons. Dreadnoughtus initially clocked in at around 65 tons, but those estimates have also shifted as scientists refined their understanding of how muscle and tissue would have been distributed across such massive frames. The challenge lies in the fact that we're essentially trying to rebuild a creature unlike anything alive today, using incomplete skeletal remains and educated guesswork about soft tissue proportions. Every new discovery, every refined measurement technique, every breakthrough in biomechanical modeling shifts our understanding of these prehistoric titans. Enter the modern revolution of 3D scanning technology, which has transformed paleontology from a largely descriptive science into something approaching engineering precision. Today's researchers can create detailed digital models of every bone, analyzing stress patterns and weight distribution with computer simulations that would have been pure science fiction just 20 years ago. These virtual reconstructions reveal fascinating details about how creatures weighing as much as loaded cargo planes could actually move without collapsing under their own weight. The scans show us the hollow chambers within their vertebrate evolutionary innovations that reduced weight without sacrificing strength, like natural I-beams supporting a living cathedral. Through this digital archaeology, we're discovering that these weren't just oversized lizards, but highly specialized biological machines perfectly adapted to their Cretaceous world. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine those ancient Patagonian winds carrying the distant rumble of approaching thunder, except it's not a storm, but the earth-shaking footsteps of creatures so large they redefined what's possible for life on land. Picture yourself standing on the muddy banks of an ancient river delta, 95 million years ago. The air hangs thick and humid over what we now call North Africa, but back then, this was a lush, watery paradise. Crocodiles as long as school buses lurk beneath lily pads the size of dinner tables. Pterosaurs with wingspans that could shadow entire villages glide overhead. And somewhere in those murky waters, something truly extraordinary is about to emerge, a creature so bizarre that when paleontologists first described it, many refused to believe it could be real. Meet Spinosaurus, the river-backed predator that rewrote everything we thought we knew about large carnivorous dinosaurs. Imagine a creature stretching 50 feet from snout to tail, tip longer than a city bus, heavier than an elephant but built like nothing that walks the earth today. Its most striking feature rises from its back, like the sail of some prehistoric yacht, a magnificent fin of bone and skin that could tower 7 feet above the creature's spine. But this isn't just for show. That sail serves as both a solar panel and a billboard, helping regulate body temperature in the sweltering African heat, while advertising the owner's presence to rivals and potential mates from miles away. Unlike its famous cousin Tyrannosaurus rex, with its bone-crushing jaws built for tearing apart massive land animals, Spinosaurus evolved for an entirely different lifestyle. Its skull stretches nearly 6 feet long, but it's narrow and elongated, almost crocodilian in its proportions. Those jaws are lined with dozens of conical teeth, each one perfectly designed not for crushing bone, but for grasping slippery, struggling fish. Picture a giant heron, scaled up to impossible proportions, wading through prehistoric rivers with the patience of a master angler. For decades, paleontologists debated whether Spinosaurus actually spent time in the water or simply fished from the shoreline like a massive bear. That debate seemed settled in 2020, when researchers unveiled perhaps the most revolutionary dinosaur discovery of the century. Spinosaurus had a paddle-shaped tail. Not the typical rigid, whip-like tail of most theropod dinosaurs, but a broad, flattened appendage that could have propelled this giant through the water with surprising grace. Computer simulations revealed that this tail could generate powerful swimming strokes, making Spinosaurus the first known semi-aquatic dinosaur of its size. But the tail fin was just the beginning. The creature's entire body plan screams aquatic adaptation. Its legs are shorter and more robust than typical predatory dinosaurs, perfect for walking on muddy riverbanks rather than chasing prey across open plains. Its feet are partially webbed, like those of a duck magnified 100-fold. Even its nostrils sit high on its skull, allowing it to breathe while most of its head remains submerged, waiting motionlessly for some unfortunate fish to swim within striking distance. Scientists didn't just rely on bones to understand Spinosaurus's lifestyle. They turned to chemistry, analyzing the isotope ratios in the dinosaur's teeth, the same technique used to determine the diet of ancient humans. These chemical signatures revealed a creature that spent most of its time in freshwater environments, feeding primarily on fish, with occasional aquatic reptiles and even small dinosaurs unfortunate enough to venture too close to the water's edge. The story of Spinosaurus carries with it one of paleontology's greatest tragedies. The original specimens, discovered in Egypt in the early 1900s by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer, were housed in Munich's Paleontological Museum. For decades, these fossils represented our only window into this incredible creature. Then came the 24th of April, 1944. Allied bombs rained down on Munich, and in a single night, the museum was destroyed. With it vanished the original Spinosaurus fossil seer, replaceable pieces of our planet's history, reduced to ash and rubble. For nearly 70 years, Spinosaurus existed only in Stromer's detailed drawings and descriptions. It wasn't until new discoveries in Morocco that we could finally begin to piece together the true nature of this remarkable predator. Today, as you drift off to sleep, imagine those ancient North African waterways where giants with sails on their backs ruled not from land, but from the rivers themselves, patient hunters in a world where the boundaries between water and land meant nothing at all. Picture yourself drifting back through deep time, 70 million years into Earth's distant past, when the air itself held different possibilities. The late Cretaceous period unfolds around you like a warm, prehistoric dream, where massive inland seas stretched across continents and the very atmosphere seemed thick with ancient mysteries. In this world of giants, where Tyrannosaurus rex stalked the forests and massive marine reptiles ruled the oceans, the skies belonged to creatures that would make our largest modern birds seem like delicate songbirds by comparison. High above the coastal plains of what we now call Texas, a shadow passes over the landscape, not the fleeting shadow of a cloud, but something far more substantial, far more alive. This is Quetzalcoatlus, the Sky Monarch, a pterosaur so impossibly large that when scientists first discovered its fossilized remains, they struggled to believe that such a creature could have ever taken flight. With wings stretching 10 to 11 meters from tip to tip, imagine a small aircraft, but one crafted from bone, muscle, and membrane. Quetzalcoatlus represents the absolute pinnacle of powered flight in Earth's history. The sheer scale of this ancient flyer defies easy comprehension. Those wings, when fully extended, could have cast shadows large enough to engulf a school bus. The creature's skull alone measured over 2.5 meters in length, longer than most people are tall, yet paradoxically, this giant of the skies weighed perhaps no more than a large dog. Evolution had crafted Quetzalcoatlus with an almost ethereal lightness, its bones hollow and paper-thin, its body a masterpiece of weight reduction that would make modern aerospace engineers weep with envy. But how did such a colossus ever manage to leave the ground? This question has captivated paleontologists for decades, leading to countless hours of research and heated scientific debates. The secret lay not in running takeoffs like modern birds, but in something far more elegant and efficient. Quetzalcoatlus was built like a living launching mechanism, with extraordinarily powerful arm and chest muscles that could vault its entire body skyward in a single, explosive motion. Picture the creature crouched on all fours, those massive wings folded against its body like an enormous tent waiting to be erected. Then, in one fluid movement, it would push down with its wing arms knot, unlike a gymnast performing a vault, and catapult itself directly into the air, unfurling those impossible wings only once it had gained sufficient altitude. Once airborne, Quetzalcoatlus transformed from an awkward ground dweller into a master of the ancient skies, riding thermals with an efficiency that modern glider pilots can only dream of achieving. But what happened when it returned to Earth was equally fascinating. Standing on the ground, this creature towered like a giraffe, its long neck extending high into the air as it surveyed the landscape with keen, predatory eyes. Imagine encountering such a being during a peaceful walk through the Cretaceous countryside. This towering figure, taller than most trees, moving with surprising grace on limbs that seemed too delicate to support such an imposing frame. The sight of Quetzalcoatlus stalking across the ancient landscape must have been both beautiful and terrifying, a creature that seemed to exist in the space between dreams and nightmares. Its long, pointed beak could probe into crevices and investigate potential meals with surgical precision, while its elevated vantage point allowed it to spot opportunities that ground-dwelling predators would miss entirely. Yet despite decades of study, scientists continue to debate exactly how Quetzalcoatlus made its living. Some envision it as a specialist fish-eater, swooping down to snatch prey from ancient waterways. Others propose it was more of a terrestrial stalker, hunting small dinosaurs and other land animals. Still, others suggest it might have been a scavenger, using its impressive size and flight capabilities to claim the choicest portions of carcasses before smaller competitors could arrive. Perhaps the truth encompasses all these possibilities, for in a world as vast and varied as the late Cretaceous, there was room for many different survival strategies. Deep in the misty bamboo forests of ancient Asia, where morning fog clings to towering stalks like whispered secrets, there once lived a creature so magnificent that even our wildest imaginations struggle to contain it. Picture, if you will, stepping through time nearly 2 million years ago, when the world hummed with a different rhythm, and the largest primate that ever drew breath ruled these emerald kingdoms with gentle authority. Gigantopithecus blacki wasn't just big, it was monumentally, almost impossibly enormous. Standing nearly 10 feet tall when upright, this forest giant would have made even our largest gorillas look like curious children. Imagine encountering something 3 times your height, covered in coarse, dark fur that rippled like shadows across muscles built for a life among the bamboo. Its massive hands, each the size of dinner plates, were perfectly designed for grasping, stripping, and processing the endless stalks that formed its daily sustenance. These weren't the nimble fingers of a tree swinger, but the powerful tools of nature's most successful vegetarian heavyweight. The shoulders would have been broader than a doorway, supporting a skull so massive that paleontologists initially mistook the first discovered teeth for those of an ancient dragon. Those jaws housed a dental fortress, massive molars with enamel thick as armor plating, designed to crush and grind the toughest plant materials hour after hour, day after day. Each tooth tells a story written in microscopic scratches and chemical signatures, revealing a life spent methodically processing bamboo shoots, leaves, and the occasional fruit that fell within reach of those enormous arms. But here's where the story becomes deliciously mysterious. These teeth, often the only remnants we have of these magnificent creatures, act like tiny time capsules, preserving secrets in their very structure. The enamel wears in specific patterns that tell us not just what Gigantopithecus ate, but how it ate, how long it lived, and even what seasons were like millions of years ago. Scientists can read these dental diaries like ancient scrolls, discovering that our forest king lived a surprisingly peaceful existence, spending most of its time sitting and methodically processing vegetation with the patience of a meditation master. The family resemblance becomes clear when we trace the evolutionary threads connecting Gigantopithecus to its smaller, more familiar cousin, the orangutan. Despite the dramatic size difference, genetic archaeology reveals shared ancestors, similar dental structures, and behavioral echoes that persist today. Watch an orangutan carefully manipulating food with its large hands, and you're glimpsing shadows of how Gigantopithecus might have lived. Both species evolved as patient foragers, content to spend hours processing plant materials, rather than engaging in the high-energy acrobatics of their more hyperactive primate relatives. Yet even giants must bow to the relentless march of climate change. As the Pleistocene world began its slow transformation, the endless bamboo forests that had supported these magnificent creatures started fragmenting and disappearing. Gigantopithecus, perfectly adapted for its specific ecological niche, found itself increasingly trapped in shrinking islands of suitable habitat. Unlike smaller, more adaptable species that could modify their diets and behaviors, these gentle giants were specialists, masters of a disappearing world. The last of their kind likely disappeared around 300,000 years ago, leaving behind only scattered teeth and the occasional jaw fragment to hint at their former majesty. They remind us that size isn't always an advantage, that specialization can become a beautiful trap, and that even the most magnificent creatures are ultimately subject to forces far beyond their control. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll find yourself wandering through those ancient bamboo forests, hearing the gentle rustle of massive forms moving peacefully through their green cathedral, processing life one careful bite at a time, unaware that they were living footnotes in Earth's endless, ever-changing story. Picture, if you will, a world carpeted not in forests, but in endless grassland stretching beyond every horizon. This was the Mammoth Steppe, vast, cold prairie that once rolled across northern Asia, Alaska, and parts of Europe like a green-gold ocean frozen in time. Here, beneath skies that seemed to touch the earth itself, wandered creatures so magnificent that even today, tens of thousands of years later, we struggle to fully comprehend their majesty. The woolly mammoth was no mere elephant draped in fur. Standing nearly 12 feet at the shoulder, these titans moved across their frigid kingdom with a grace that belied their enormous bulk. Their bodies were living fortresses against the cold, thick, chocolate-brown hair cascading in layers, with an undercoat so dense it could trap air like the finest down. But perhaps most striking of all were those spiraling tusks, curving upward and inward like frozen lightning, some growing to lengths of 16 feet or more. These tusks weren't mere ornaments. Watch a mammoth use them, and you'd witness tools of remarkable sophistication. They scraped away snow to reach the grass beneath, stripped bark from the scattered trees, and served as weapons when rival bulls clashed in battles that shook the very ground. The spiral wasn't accidental, it was engineering perfected over millions of years, providing maximum strength while preventing the tusks from growing so long they became unwieldy burdens. Their ears, tiny compared to their African cousins, barely peeked through their shaggy manes. Their trunks, shorter and stockier, were built for a life of constant foraging in harsh conditions. Every feature spoke of adaptation to a world where summer meant survival and winter meant endurance. Then came the revolution of ice and DNA. In the Siberian permafrost, mammoth bodies emerged like messages from another age, so perfectly preserved that scientists could examine their stomach contents, feel the texture of their hair, and peer into their very cells. The frozen ground had become a library, each mammoth a book written in flesh and bone, waiting for us to learn how to read. From these ancient remains, we've extracted DNA older than human civilization, genetic instructions that paint pictures of mammoth society more detailed than any cave painting. We've learned they lived in tight family groups led by the oldest females, just like elephants today. We've discovered they could live 60 years or more, accumulating wisdom across decades of harsh winters and brief, glorious summers. But the permafrost tells another story too, and of tragedy written in spear points and butchered bones. As humans spread across the mammoth steppe, they brought with them technologies that could bring down even these giants. Hunting scenes painted on cave walls show coordinated attacks, groups of hunters working together to separate young mammoths from their protective mothers. The relationship between human and mammoth was complex, part predator and prey, part spiritual connection that echoed through shamanic traditions and creation myths. Yet it wasn't human hunting alone that sealed the mammoth's fate. The earth itself was changing. As the last ice age waned, the mammoth steppe began to shrink and fragment. Forests crept northward, replacing the grasslands with trees that mammoth digestive systems couldn't process efficiently. The vast, unbroken prairie became islands of suitable habitat, separated by increasingly hostile terrain. The warming climate created a cascade of changes. Wetlands expanded, turning firm ground into impassable bog. New plant communities emerged that couldn't support mammoth herds. The very foundation of mammoth civilization was dissolving beneath their enormous feet. On Wrangel Island, a small patch of Arctic land between Siberia and Alaska, a final population held on. These last mammoths, isolated and dwindling, survived until just 4,000 years ago, long after the pyramids rose in Egypt, long after humans had spread to every continent. They were the final echoes of an Ice Age empire, growing smaller with each generation until, one day, the last mammoth drew its final breath, and an entire world vanished with it. 34 million years ago, in the gentle warmth of the Oligocene epoch, something extraordinary wandered through the sprawling woodlands of what we now call Central Asia. The morning mist would have clung to ancient trees as the largest land mammal that ever lived moved silently between the branches, its massive form casting shadows that stretched like cathedral pillars across the forest floor. This was Paraceratherium, though you might know it by its older name, Indracotherium. Picture, if you will, a creature that defied every expectation of what a rhinoceros could be. Standing 5 meters tall at the shoulder, that's roughly the height of a modern Giraffethis, gentle giant weighed somewhere around 15 tons. To put that in perspective, imagine 3 African elephants stacked together, and you're getting close to the sheer mass of this remarkable beast. But here's what made Paraceratherium truly unique among its rhinoceros relatives. It had no horn. Its elongated skull swept gracefully from its shoulders, ending in a surprisingly delicate snout that could reach heights no other browsing mammal could dream of touching. Those front legs, longer than the back ones, gave it an almost giraffe-like silhouette, perfectly adapted for reaching into the highest canopies, where the most nutritious leaves waited. The woodland world of the Oligocene was vastly different from today's landscapes. Dense forests stretched across continents, filled with trees whose names have been lost to time. Our Paraceratherium would begin each day much as elephants do now, moving slowly through its territory in search of breakfast. With its extraordinary reach, that long neck could extend nearly 7 meters into the air, it could access food sources that remained untouched by other herbivores. Watch it move through your mind's eye, each step deliberate and measured, the ground trembling slightly under those massive feet. It would have used its muscular lips and flexible snout like a trunk, wrapping around branches to strip leaves with surprising gentleness. Despite its enormous size, Paraceratherium was likely a peaceful creature, its sheer bulk providing all the protection it needed from predators. The daily rhythm of these giants would have been unhurried, moving between feeding spots, pausing to rest in whatever shade their massive bodies could find, perhaps gathering in small family groups near water sources. Their world was one of abundance, endless forests providing endless meals for creatures large enough to reach them. Our understanding of these magnificent animals comes largely from the tireless work of paleontologists who ventured into some of the most remote regions of Central Asia, in the early 20th century. Picture these expeditions. Teams of scientists traveling by camel and horseback across the Gobi Desert, following rumors of giant bones weathering out of ancient rock formations. The first significant discoveries came from Pakistan and Mongolia, where entire skeletons began to emerge from sediments that had held them for millions of years. Each bone told part of the story massive vertebrae, revealing the creature's incredible size, elongated limb bones, showing its unusual proportions, skull fragments demonstrating its hornless nature. As paleontologists painstakingly reconstructed these skeletons, a picture emerged of an animal unlike anything alive today. The fossils revealed not just size, but lifestyle wear patterns on teeth showed a diet of soft leaves and shoots. Joint structures indicated a relatively slow but steady way of moving. Bone density suggested these animals lived long lives in their peaceful woodland world. What strikes researchers most about Paraceratherium is how it represents evolution's answer to a specific environmental opportunity. In the lush forests of the Oligocene, there was a niche waiting to be filled, the role of the ultimate browser, tall enough to feed where no other animal could reach. And nature, in its infinite creativity, transformed the basic rhinoceros body plan into something that could claim this elevated kingdom as its own. These gentle giants disappeared as their forest world gradually gave way to more open landscapes, but their legacy lives on in museum halls around the world, where their reconstructed skeletons still inspire wonder in visitors who crane their necks upward, trying to imagine what it would have been like to walk beneath these titans of the ancient world. Picture this: you're floating in warm, shallow seas that stretch endlessly in every direction. The year is roughly 75 million years ago, and you're suspended in the western interior sea Oaya, massive body of water that once split North America right down the middle, from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. The water around you glows with an almost ethereal turquoise, and limestone sediments drift lazily through the currents like underwater snow. Then, from the blue-green depths below, a shadow emerges. At first, you might mistake it for a small island drifting upward, but as it approaches, the true magnitude becomes clear. This is Archelon Cuite, possibly the largest sea turtle that ever lived, stretching nearly 4 meters from the tip of its massive head to the end of its shell. To put that in perspective, imagine a small car, then picture it swimming gracefully through ancient seas with the fluid motion of a creature perfectly adapted to its aquatic world. Archelon's shell wasn't the heavy, dome-like fortress you might expect from its modern relatives. Instead, evolution had crafted something far more eleganter, relatively flat, streamlined carapace that reduced drag as the giant turtle glided through the water. The shell itself was more cartilage than solid bone, giving it flexibility while still providing protection. Dark, mottled patterns likely decorated its surface, providing camouflage against the dappled light filtering down through the seaway's waters. Those massive flipper seach, one longer than a grown human, were Archelon's true masterpiece of engineering. Unlike the stubby appendages of land turtles, these had evolved into perfect hydrodynamic wings. Watch as our Archelon begins to swim, and you'll notice something almost bird-like in its movement. Those enormous front flippers don't paddle frantically like a drowning swimmer. Instead, they move with the measured, powerful strokes of a creature that has mastered its environment. Each downward sweep propels tons of turtle forward with surprising grace, while the smaller rear flippers act as rudders, making subtle adjustments to maintain direction through the warm currents. The Western Interior Seaway wasn't just Archelon's highway, it was its entire world. This was a sea teeming with life, where massive marine reptiles ruled supreme. Schools of primitive fish darted between floating mats of seaweed, while overhead, pterosaurs with wingspans rivaling small aircraft skimmed the surface, hunting for prey. For Archelon, this underwater landscape provided endless feeding opportunities. Its powerful beak, lacking teeth but perfectly shaped for its diet, could crack open the shells of ammonites, those spiral-shelled creatures that drifted through the water column like living nautiluses. But even giants must come ashore eventually. When the urge to reproduce struck, female Archelon faced an epic journey from the deep waters of the seaway to its chalk-white beaches. Picture the scene: a 4-meter turtle, weighing as much as a small elephant, hauling herself onto shores that gleamed almost blindingly white under the Cretaceous sun. These beaches were formed from the compressed remains of countless microscopic marine organisms, creating vast stretches of pure chalk that extended inland for kilometers. The nesting process was exhausting. Using flippers designed for swimming, she would laboriously excavate a hole in the soft chalk, sometimes digging for hours to create the perfect nest. Once her eggs were safely buried, she would begin the treacherous journey back to the water, leaving her offspring to develop in the warm sand over the coming months. Yet, even a creature as massive as Archelon wasn't safe from the seaway's apex predators. Lurking in the deeper waters were mosasaurs marine lizards that had evolved into the ocean's ultimate killing machines. Some species, like Tylosaurus, stretched over 15 meters long, their powerful jaws lined with sharp teeth perfectly designed for gripping struggling prey. When a mosasaurus decided to hunt Archelon, the encounter would have been one of the most spectacular predator-prey interactions in Earth's history. In this ancient world of giants, Archelon ruled the shallows with quiet majesty. Imagine drifting through the warm, shallow seas of the Middle Jurassic, some 165 million years ago, when suddenly the water around you darkens, not from storm clouds above, but from something vast gliding beneath something so impossibly large that your mind struggles to process its scale. This is Leadzyphthys problematicus, and at roughly 16 meters in length, it remains the largest bony fish that ever lived. To put this in perspective, a modern great white shark would look like a minnow swimming alongside this gentle giant. Leadzyphthys stretched longer than a city bus, its body gracefully cutting through ancient waters that covered much of what we now call Europe. These weren't the deep, mysterious oceans of today, but warm, relatively shallow seas teeming with life-perfect hunting grounds for a creature that fed not on flesh, but on the countless tiny organisms that drifted in the water column. The Jurassic seas were nothing like our modern oceans. Picture a vast turquoise expanse, warmer than a tropical lagoon, stretching across landscapes that would one day become England, France, and Germany. There were no polar ice caps to chill the waters, no grass on the scattered islands, just cycads and conifers creating prehistoric coastlines. In these nutrient-rich waters, microscopic life exploded in abundance, creating the perfect conditions for filter feeders to grow to extraordinary sizes. Leadzyphthys was built like a living net, perfectly designed to harvest this bounty. Its massive head housed an intricate filtering system, with gill rakers that worked like the baleen of a modern whale. As it cruised through the water with its mouth agape, millions of tiny copepods, small fish, and marine arthropods would be trapped and swallowed. The creature's body was elegantly streamlined, despite its enormous size, with a powerful tail that could propel tons of fish through the water with surprising grace. Unlike the predatory marine reptiles that shared its world, the long-necked plesiosaurs and dolphin-like ichthyosaurs Leadzyphthys was utterly peaceful. It had no need for sharp teeth or crushing jaws. Instead, evolution had gifted it with patience and efficiency. Day after day, it would patrol the same feeding grounds, following the rhythms of plankton blooms like an underwater nomad tracking invisible herds across the seafloor. These plankton blooms were everything to Leadzyphthys. When conditions were right, when nutrients mixed perfectly with sunlight and warm currents, the tiny organisms would multiply explosively, turning vast areas of ocean into living soup. The giant fish learned to follow these blooms, perhaps migrating vast distances, as the seasons changed and the microscopic harvest moved through ancient seaways. But the same dependence that allowed Leadzyphthys to grow so large also made it vulnerable. When climate shifted or ocean chemistry changed, when the delicate balance that supported massive plankton blooms faltered, giants like these had nowhere to turn. They were specialists in a world that rewarded generalists, magnificent creatures whose very success contained the seeds of their eventual extinction. We know about Leadzyphthys today thanks to a remarkable detective story that began in the clay pits of Nottinghamshire. In the 1880s, workers quarrying Oxford clay for brickmaking kept uncovering enormous fossilized bones ribs as long as a person, vertebrae the size of dinner plates. For decades, paleontologists argued about what kind of creature could have possessed such massive remains. Some thought it was a marine crocodile, others a giant marine reptile. It wasn't until the 1980s that careful analysis revealed the truth. These were the bones of a fish, but a fish unlike anything swimming in our oceans today. The Nottinghamshire bone beds had preserved not just isolated bones, but glimpses of entire ecosystems, frozen moments from Jurassic seas where giants ruled through gentleness rather than violence. As you drift off tonight, picture yourself floating in those ancient waters, watching shadows pass overhead, not threatening, but peaceful, as the largest fish that ever lived continues its eternal search for the next plankton bloom, somewhere in the deep blue memories of our planet's distant past. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a warm, shallow estuary 420 million years ago. The Silurian period stretches endlessly before us, a time when continents drift like lazy thoughts across an alien Earth. No flowers bloom along these ancient shores, no grass waves in the prehistoric breeze. Instead, primitive plants huddle close to the waterline, their simple stems reaching toward a sun that burns with the same gentle warmth we know today, yet illuminates a world utterly transformed. The water before you appears deceptively calm, its surface broken only by the occasional ripple. But beneath these murky depths lurks something magnificent and terrifying, a creature so large it defies our modern understanding of arthropod life. This is the domain of Aecolopterus rhenanii, the largest arthropod that ever lived, a sea scorpion whose very existence challenges everything we think we know about the limits of jointed-leg creatures. Imagine watching as this titan emerges from the silted bottom. 8.5 feet of segmented terror rises through the water column, its massive form casting shadows that would dwarf a modern human. To put this in perspective, if you lay Aecolopterus alongside a small car, the sea scorpion would be longer. Its body, encased in chitinous armor, moves with surprising grace through the water, powered by paddle-like appendages that sweep back and forth in hypnotic rhythm. But it's the pincers that truly capture your attention, those enormous grasping claws that extend forward like the arms of some prehistoric nightmare. Each pincer stretches nearly 3 feet in length, equipped with serrated edges designed for one purpose: capturing and crushing prey. The mechanics of these appendages represent evolutionary engineering at its finest. Unlike modern lobster claws that close with brute force, Aecolopterus possessed sophisticated muscles that could apply precise pressure, holding struggling fish while razor-sharp edges slice through scale and bone. Watch as our sea scorpion stalks through the estuary shallows, its compound eyes scanning for movement. Those eyes, larger than tennis balls, contain thousands of individual lenses, each one capable of detecting the slightest motion in the murky water. When prey approaches, perhaps a primitive fish or smaller arthropod, those massive pincers snap forward with startling speed, the joints working like a complex mechanical system powered by muscle and hydraulic pressure. The sheer size of Aecolopterus raises fascinating questions about the ancient world it inhabited. How could an arthropod grow so large? The answer lies partially in the atmosphere itself. During the Silurian period, oxygen levels fluctuated dramatically, sometimes reaching concentrations nearly twice what we breathe today. For arthropods, which rely on passive oxygen diffusion through their exoskeletons, this oxygen-rich environment removed the normal constraints on body size. More oxygen meant larger spiracles could supply massive bodies, allowing these creatures to achieve dimensions that would be impossible in our modern world. The elevated oxygen also supported the robust metabolisms required to power such enormous frames. Imagine the energy needed to move those giant pincers, to pump fluid through yards of internal channels, to maintain the complex neural networks required to coordinate such a massive body. In our current atmosphere, Aecolopterus would literally suffocate under its own size. We know about these magnificent creatures not just from their fossilized remains, but from something far more intimate: their footprints. In ancient lake beds and estuary floors, paleontologists have discovered trace fossils called trackways, the preserved impressions left by Aecolopterus as it walked across submerged surfaces. These ghostly trails tell stories of daily life 400 million years ago, showing us how these giants moved, where they hunted, and how they interacted with their environment. The trackways reveal surprising details about sea scorpion behavior. Some show the careful, methodical pace of a hunting predator. Others display the chaotic scramble of escape or pursuit. A few precious examples even show where two Jacalopterus crossed paths, their trails intersecting in brief moments of prehistoric drama we can only imagine. Yet for all their magnificence, the sea scorpions could not last forever. As oxygen levels dropped and new predators evolved, the age of giant arthropods drew to a close, leaving us only fossils and trackways to remember the time when arthropods ruled as giants. Picture this. 60 million years ago, the world was a greenhouse. No ice caps gleamed at the poles. No frozen tundra stretched across continents. Instead, palm trees swayed in what we now call Alaska, and crocodiles basked in Arctic rivers. But nowhere was this ancient heat more oppressive than in the steaming swamps of what would become Colombia, where something extraordinary slithered through the murky waters. Meet Titanoboa cerrejonensis serpent, so impossibly massive that it makes today's largest anacondas look like earthworms. Imagine a snake as long as a school bus, weighing as much as a small car, with a body thick enough that you couldn't wrap your arms around it. This was no mythological creature from ancient legends. This was real, and for millions of years, it was the undisputed apex predator of South America's Paleocene forests. The story of Titanoboa's discovery reads like an adventure novel. In the early 2000s, paleontologists were sifting through rocks in the Cerrejón coal mine, one of the world's largest open-pit mines carved into the Colombian landscape. The miners had been unknowingly excavating through what was once a vast tropical rainforest, compressed over millennia into seams of coal. But hidden within these layers was something far more precious than fossil fuels, the fossilized remains of an ancient ecosystem. Dr. Carlos Jaramillo and his team weren't initially looking for giant snakes. They were studying ancient plants, trying to understand what Colombia's climate was like during the Paleocene epoch. But then the vertebrae started appearing, massive, curved bones that were clearly from a snake, but impossibly large. The first reaction was skepticism. Surely these bones belonged to multiple animals, or perhaps a crocodile had been misidentified. But as more specimens emerged from the ancient mudstone, the truth became undeniable. They had discovered the remains of the largest snake that ever lived. The formal description, published in 2009, sent shockwaves through the paleontological community. Titanoboa wasn't just Bidget, was rewriting the rules of what was possible in the animal kingdom. To understand just how massive this creature was, let's put it in perspective. The longest reliably measured python today stretches about 8 meters. Titanoboa reached 14 meters, nearly twice as long. While a large anaconda might weigh 250 kilograms, Titanoboa tipped the scales at over 1,100 kilograms. Its skull alone was larger than a human head, filled with razor-sharp, backward-curving teeth designed to grip struggling prey. But Titanoboa wasn't built for speed or agility. Like its modern relatives, it was an ambush predator, a master of patience. Picture it coiled motionlessly in the shallows of a Paleocene river, looking like nothing more than a fallen log. Its prey, giant turtles, early crocodilians, and primitive mammals would approach the water's edge to drink, unaware of the death that waited beneath the surface. When Titanoboa struck, there was no escape. Those massive coils would wrap around its victim with crushing force, each squeeze tightening the inescapable embrace. The snake didn't need venom. Physics was its weapon. A constrictor kills not by crushing bones, but by preventing its prey from breathing. Each time the victim exhaled, Titanoboa would tighten its grip slightly, until eventually circulation ceased and consciousness faded. The discovery of Titanoboa revealed something profound about Earth's ancient climate. You see, snakes are ectothermic, cold-blooded creatures whose body temperature depends on their environment. There's a fundamental relationship between how large a snake can grow and how warm its habitat is. Using thermal niche modeling, scientists could work backward from Titanoboa's size to determine the temperature of its environment. The math was startling. For a snake of Titanoboa's proportions to survive, the average temperature of the Paleocene tropics must have been between 32 and 33 degrees Celsius, significantly hotter than today's Amazon rainforest. This wasn't just paleontology, it was climate science written in bone. Titanoboa became a scaly thermometer. telling us that the early Paleocene was even more dramatically warm than previously imagined. But every reign must end. As the Paleocene gave way to the Eocene, global temperatures began to cool. The massive snake that had ruled the swamps for millions of years found itself increasingly out of step with a changing world. Smaller, more adaptable species began to dominate, and gradually the age of giants came to a close. Titanoboa slipped away into deep time, leaving only scattered vertebrae and an incredible story of life at the extremes. Picture yourself wandering through a forest 300 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period. The air feels thick and humid, almost soupy with oxygen. Towering tree ferns stretch overhead like green umbrellas, their fronds rustling in the prehistoric breeze. The ground squelches beneath your feet, carpeted with decomposing plant matter that will eventually become the coal seams we mine today. But something's not quite right about this ancient woodland paradise. The shadows seem to move with purpose, and there's a subtle clicking sound echoing between the massive tree trunks. You're not alone in this primordial forest. Scuttling through the undergrowth, navigating fallen logs with surprising grace, lives one of the most formidable predators of its time. Meet Pulmonoscorpius, whose name literally means breathing scorpion, though you might know it better as the monster scorpion that makes your skin crawl just thinking about it. This isn't your garden variety arachnid that you might find hiding under a rock in your backyard. No, Pulmonoscorpius stretched nearly 70 centimeters from its pincers to the tip of its venomous tail. That's over 2 feet of pure, prehistoric nightmare fuel. Imagine encountering this beast during your forest stroll. Its massive claws, called pedipalps, could easily crush small vertebrates, while its segmented tail curved menacingly overhead, tipped with a stinger capable of delivering potent venom. The creature's 8 legs carried it with surprising speed across the forest floor, each step deliberate and predatory. Its body, covered in a tough exoskeleton, gleamed like ancient armor in the dappled forest light. But Pulmonoscorpius wasn't just big for the sake of being big. It was perfectly adapted to its oxygen-rich world. The Carboniferous forests teemed with other giants that would make today's arthropods look like toys. Massive millipedes, some stretching over 6 feet in length, bulldozed through the leaf litter like living trains. These gentle giants, despite their intimidating size, munched peacefully on decaying plant matter, their countless legs working in perfect waves to propel them forward. Giant dragonflies with wingspans approaching that of modern hawks patrolled the skies, while enormous cockroaches scurried through the underbrush, some growing larger than your hand. What made these creatures grow to such incredible sizes? The secret lies in the very air they breathed. During the Carboniferous period, atmospheric oxygen levels soared to an astounding 35%, nearly double what we breathe today. This oxygen-rich atmosphere was like steroids for arthropods, allowing them to grow far beyond the size constraints that limit their modern descendants. But there's a catch. These creatures needed specialized breathing equipment to process all that extra oxygen. Pulmonoscorpius and its giant relatives possessed something called book lungs, intricate respiratory organs that resembled the pages of a book. These organs contained thin, sheet-like structures that maximized surface area for gas exchange, allowing these massive arthropods to efficiently extract oxygen from their supercharged atmosphere. The more oxygen available, the larger these breathing organs could become, and the bigger the creatures could grow. It was an evolutionary arms race powered by atmospheric chemistry. The evidence for these remarkable creatures comes from extraordinary fossil sites like East Kirkton in Scotland, where paleontologists have uncovered not just body fossils, but actual trackways, the footprints and drag marks left by these ancient giants as they moved through their world. These trace fossils tell stories of daily life in the Carboniferous forests, showing us exactly how these creatures lived, hunted, and navigated their prehistoric landscape. As oxygen levels eventually dropped back to more familiar concentrations, the age of giant arthropods came to an end. Today's scorpions, millipedes, and insects are mere shadows of their Carboniferous ancestors, constrained by the very air that once allowed their predecessors to reach such magnificent proportions. But in those ancient coal forests, For a brief geological moment, invertebrates ruled as giants. Picture this. You're standing at the edge of the ocean, watching a blue whale surface for air. Its back breaks the water like a living island, stretching further than you can comfortably take in with a single glance. How do you measure something that vast? How do you wrap human understanding around a creature that exists on a scale our minds weren't built to comprehend? This is the gentle puzzle that has occupied marine biologists and paleontologists for decades. We are, after all, remarkably small beings attempting to catalogue remarkably large ones. It's a bit like an ant trying to measure a cathedral while standing on the floor. Ambitious, necessary, and beautifully absurd all at once. The tools we use reveal as much about human ingenuity as they do about the creatures themselves. Take laser scanning, for instance. Researchers now use LiDAR technology, the same systems that map mountain ranges and archaeological sites, to measure whales as they surface. Imagine a whale researcher on a boat, pointing what looks like a sophisticated surveying instrument at a creature that weighs as much as 30 elephants. The laser bounces off the whale's skin, creating a three-dimensional map, accurate to within centimeters. There's something almost ceremonial about this process. The whale surfaces, unaware it's being immortalized in data points. The laser sweeps across its length, recording every ridge and curve of its massive form. In those brief moments before the whale disappears beneath the surface again, science captures something eternal, a precise record of magnificence in motion. But here's where it gets wonderfully complicated. Whales don't stay still for their portraits. They arch and bend as they breathe, their flexible spines creating different measurements depending on the moment you catch them. A blue whale measured mid-dive might appear shorter than the same whale photographed at full stretch. This isn't measurement error, it's the poetry of studying living giants. Then there are the bones, those ancient archives buried in stone and scattered across museum floors. LiDAR mapping has revolutionized how we understand extinct giants. Researchers can now scan fossilized vertebrae and ribs with extraordinary precision, building digital skeletons of creatures that vanished millions of years ago. The Argentinosaurus, that impossibly long sauropod, exists now as both scattered fossils and pristine computer models, its full length debated and refined with each new technological advance. These fossil measurements carry their own humbling uncertainties. We're extrapolating entire creatures from incomplete puzzles, sometimes just a few vertebrae or a single massive femur. Paleontologists become archaeologists of scale, making educated guesses about muscle mass and soft tissue, building giants from fragments with mathematical poetry. Perhaps most fascinating are the satellite tags, those tiny technological marvels that turn wild whales into willing research partners. A blue whale diving in the Pacific Ocean, tagged with a device no larger than a smartphone, becomes a data point in our understanding of the planet's largest animals. The satellite tracks not just location, but dive patterns, feeding behaviors, and migration routes spanning thousands of miles. This creates measurements beyond simple length and weight. We're now measuring the scale of their lives, blue whales that travel from Alaska to Mexico, covering distances that dwarf our human comprehension of routine. Their feeding grounds become dots on global maps, their migration patterns traced like ancient trade routes across empty ocean. What strikes me most about all this measurement is how it reveals the provisional nature of human knowledge. Records get broken, methodologies improve, and our understanding shifts like sand. The largest creature changes depending on how you measure: longest, heaviest, tallest, most massive. We create categories and subcategories, qualifying our superlatives with careful scientific language. There's something beautifully human about this endless measuring, this need to quantify the magnificent. We are witnesses to scales beyond our natural understanding, armed with increasingly sophisticated tools but still fundamentally small creatures trying to comprehend the incomprehensibly large. In measuring giants, we measure ourselves, our curiosity, our humility, and our endless capacity for wonder.